Hey all, I just wanted to do a short video for you because the video that you'll see by Dr. Morley on the histology of skin will mostly cover the slides, but it does leave out the last few models, and it's a little bit hard sometimes for you to translate that from the slides to the models. I know they look a little bit different. So I wanted to do just a short video to introduce you to these models. So you're mostly going to see these structures on the models, but you can, and we do on the practical, ask you to we'll point to like the papillary region, and sometimes ask you what is this region of the dermis, or we can also tag the reticular. We can say what region of the dermis is this and tag the reticular region. And then it's a little tough to see the different layers. Sometimes we can tag the very bottom layer and say, what is this first layer of the epidermis? And so that's the stratum basal, which is going to be your germinative layer, your layer where the cells are undergoing mitosis. So let me go ahead and pull up these models, and that way then we can go over some of the structures that you'll see on these models. Sorry, I'm just going to pull up the labeled models, which are a little bit busy, but at least I can kind of talk about some of these different structures. So in this model here, you're going to see they do actually break up some of the layers for the epidermis. So again, this is why I go through this model, because it's a little challenging, especially when you don't have the model in hand. But this layer here is the epidermis, and then this layer here is the dermis. And then you're getting into the hypodermis when you're going down here and below, which is also called the subcutaneous layer. Hypodermis and subcutaneous layer are used interchangeably. So let's start with just the epidermis. So again, the epidermis is going to be here. I'm lining these dermal papilla. It's going to be from everything above these little dermal papilla, that these little finger-like structures that are sticking up into the epidermis. So anything that's in the purple above here is going to be the epidermis. So you can break this down into the 5 different layers that make up the epidermis. The very bottom layer, it can be called the stratum basal. It's the germinative layer where those cells are going to be undergoing mitosis. So this would be, we would say, what is this very bottom layer of the epidermis? And that will be the stratum basal. Then if we're pointing to this layer above here, that's all going to be all of this kind of really dark purple layer above that initial first layer will be the stratum spinosum. And then if you go up one layer here, this is going to be in the kind of the darker line here will be the stratum granulosum. You won't see the stratum lucidum here, so there is no stratum lucidum. Again, that's only going to be seen in like the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet on areas where you need that thicker skin. So that's left out in this model. And then, so this would be like, skin from your arm. And then here you have the stratum corneum in pink here, which is going to be that outer layer. So that's going to be the epidermis. Now let's talk about the dermis. So again, the dermis is going to go from here, the beginning of this like pink layer here, all the way down to right around when you start to see the yellow portion here. The yellow portion is adipose tissue. And so that adipose tissue is more indicative of the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer. So the subcutaneous layer is going to have a lot more fat than the dermis is. The dermis is mostly going to be connective tissue with these structures running through it. So hopefully that'll kind of help you to identify those different layers from each other. So now let's talk just about the dermis. So just about this portion right here. So when we talk about the dermis, we can break it up into 2 layers. Okay, so the epidermis is broken up into 5. The dermis can be broken up into 2. This is the papillary layer. The papillary layer is going to be the area of the dermis underneath these dermal papilla. The dermal papilla are literally these fingers of dermis. They literally look like, if you could put your finger in there, it looks like you've taken your finger and pushed the dermis up into the epidermis. These are what are the dermal papilla. Okay, and so this area here is going to be called the papillary layer because, again, it's going to be the tissue underneath the dermal papilla. So that's where it gets its name, papillary layer. And so here you'll see, again, that's that papillary layer. This is going to be like, if you're looking at the tissue slides, if you remember, this will be where you'll see like a lot of areolar connective tissue in there. In those dermal papilla, you will see blood vessels running through there from the dermis pushing up. And that's part of the reason that we have the dermal papilla, is that, again, it increases surface area where blood vessels from the dermis can share nutrients to the epidermis, which is avascular. That epidermis doesn't have any blood cells in it or blood vessels in it to bring nutrients to it. So it's just through, again, diffusion through the dermis, the dermal cells into the epidermis. So that's why you'll see that. So there's that papillary layer. One of the structures that you'll see in the dermal papilla is what's called a Meissner's corpuscle or tactile corpuscle. These are going to be these corpuscles that are going to be sensitive to light touch. So that's why they're much higher up in the dermis, versus you can compare that to your Pacinian corpuscles, which they look like an onion, like a slice through an onion. Those are going to be found much deeper in the dermis and then even into the hypodermis sometimes. That's because they're going to be detecting deep pressure. Okay. So hopefully that will help you out. Now let's talk about the reticular layer. So again, we have those two layers of the dermis. We have the papillary layer underneath the dermal papilla. And then below that, we have the reticular layer. That's going to consist mostly of dense, irregular connective tissue, like in your slides. And then it's going to have all of these structures running through it. So a lot of these accessory organs are going to run through this portion of the dermis. So this is where you're going to see your sebaceous glands that are going to be releasing oil. So those are those sebaceous glands you'll see here. And here you can see one actually opened up here. So there's a sebaceous gland as well. Those sebaceous glands will always dump into the hair follicle. So that's how you can identify them from your sweat glands or your sudoriferous glands. So there's your sweat gland, or more formally called your sudoriferous gland. And those glands are always going to have these long ducts that go all the way to the epidermis and open up to the epidermis. So that's the big difference. Sebaceous glands are going to be opening up into the hair follicle. The sudoriferous glands are going to have a long duct that goes all the way to the surface of the epidermis. So hopefully that will help you identify those from each other. Along with these, let's go ahead and finish off talking about the hair follicle. So when you talk about the hair follicle here, you have the hair shaft, the shaft of the hair. Then you're going to have the actual follicle, and it's a little hard to see, but that's going to be this layer here that's going to be in kind of pink around here, kind of pink and purple there. That will be the hair follicle that surrounds that hair shaft. And then you're going to see at the very bottom, you'll have what's called the papilla of the hair. Papilla is like a finger-like structure that pushes up. So here, the papilla of the hair is going to be this structure that pushes up with the blood vessels that are feeding the root of the hair. So, and oftentimes we actually call this portion, so what's going to be the hair shaft, we usually call it the root of the hair when it's underneath the surface. And then above the surface, we call it the hair shaft. So, hair root underneath here becomes the hair shaft. And so again, there's that finger-like structure, which is called the papilla of the hair. The follicle is this tissue that surrounds that root of the hair. And then again, you have sebaceous glands that will dump again oil into again that opening where the hair shaft will come out. So let's see, let's go through now that we did the hair. And we talked about the hair root inside there. Let's go ahead and talk about the erector pili muscle. So the erector pili muscle is your goosebump muscle. And that is literally the muscle that's going to make your hair stand erect. So hence erector pili, if that helps. If that helps you remember it, or again, you can remember it as your goosebump muscle. Let's see if I've missed anything else. I think I hit everything on that one. Let's go ahead and talk about the skin plaque. So again, the skin plaque here is going to be a little bit goofy because again, it marks the hair shaft being underneath the surface. We technically, and that's just kind of a mislabeling on this. Technically, again, that hair shaft is above the surface because there is a mistake here. I don't usually count off on the practical for that. But again, usually we call this hair root underneath the surface here. Again, the papilla of the hair here is bringing that little finger-like structure that brings up the blood vessels into, again, that root of the hair. And then this pink tissue surrounding it is the hair follicle. That's marked to number 14 here. And then we have our erector pili muscle here. And then, of course, your sebaceous gland, which they kind of look like these big adipose tissue cells because, again, it's a sebaceous gland. It's producing oil. So they're going to be these kind of big round cells that are holding oil. So that's sebaceous gland. Again, you can see that on here with the hair root, the hair follicle, sebaceous gland as well, and then the hair shaft at the surface. And then here again, sebaceous gland, erector pili, so on. Then, oh, I forgot to mention again that it does break up your model first off into epidermis and then into dermis and then subcutaneous layer at the bottom here with all that yellow fat adipose tissue. Again, the epidermis is broken up into that very first layer. That's going to be the stratum basale. That next layer, the stratum spinosum. This layer here that's in kind of the darker pinkish purple, that's supposed to represent the stratum granulosum with those little kind of purple granules in there. Then right above that, you do have the clear layer that would make up the stratum lucidum. And then above that is your stratum corneum. So because this has the stratum lucidum, this would be a section of your skin that you would be taking from like the palm of your hand or again, the soles of your feet. So again, in this last layer is that thick, that stratum corneum layer. Let's talk about then the dermis. So again, you can see the dermal papilla here, underneath that stratum basale layer. So underneath that kind of purplish pink layer is, you can see the blood vessels running inside those dermal papilla, and that is going to be your papillary layer. And then all of this layer underneath that is going to be the reticular layer of the dermis. And then it'll run all the way down until you get to the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer with all that fat. Again, you have very similar structures here, like we just talked about with the sebaceous gland and the hair follicles, and the erector pili muscles. Here it looks a little bit different because it's trying to show what it would look like instead of a section as a whole. This is the Meissner corpuscle that would detect soft touch. And again, you always know it's a Meissner corpuscle if it's underneath those dermal papilla. Okay, So that's where you're going to find the Meissner's corpuscle. Here, much deeper, is going to be your Pacinian corpuscle. Oh, I forgot to mention, you can also call it the lamellar corpuscle, whichever one works for you. I use the kind of old-fashioned terms that are named after the scientist, Meissner corpuscle and Pacinian corpuscle, but you're welcome to use tactile corpuscle for the Meissners and lamellar corpuscle. Pick one. You don't have to memorize both, but I just do tend to use the scientists' names. Let's see. And then I think we actually covered everything from this slide, so we just have one more. Here again, you're going to have in this model, it's going to look very similar. This is kind of my favorite model because it's more 3D, but you're going to see again, you have the model broken up into the epidermis and then the dermis and then the subcutaneous layer here at the very bottom. It marks it as the dermis, but it's kind of this transition area where you're transitioning into that subcutaneous layer with a lot more fat cells. So let's talk about the epidermis. So again, the epidermis, you have the 5 strata and they show all of them here. So again, you have that stratum basal, which is that little layer that's really in dark blue. It's just 1 cell layer thick. Then all of this kind of bigger layer is going to be the stratum spinosum. Then this layer, which is really kind of hard to see on this model, it's kind of like a smoother blue, is going to be the stratum granulosum. Then the layer above here is going to be the stratum lucidum. And then here is going to be the stratum corneum. So again, because it has the stratum lucidum, it is going to be in the, that will be in the palms of your hands as well as the soles of your feet. So let's go ahead and, sorry, I had a slight interruption in my video, so there may be a little like chunk that I had to cut out there. So anyway, I think we left off here again with those were the 5 layers. And again, because it has the stratum lucidum, you're going to find that in the palms of your hand as well as the soles of your feet. Let's go ahead then and talk about the dermis here. So here's the dermis. Inside the dermis, you will have 2 layers. Again, you have the papillary layer under these dermal papilla. In this model, they draw the dermal papilla more of kind of what they really look like in real life. They're not always this perfect, even finger-like structures, right? So here you see they're kind of all wonky. That's kind of more what the dermal papilla really look like. So again, those are the dermal papilla. And then of course that region right underneath is called the papillary region. Inside that papillary region, you will find the Meissner's corpuscle here in red. Those are the Meissner's corpuscles inside those dermal papilla. Then in the reticular region, again, we're going to find all of these lovely structures. We've got the hair follicle here with the hair root inside. And then you have the hair papilla that's pushing up and bringing those blood vessels to feed that hair root. Again, remember we call the hair shaft. That's the hair above the surface and then hair root below. Let's see, I think we covered all this. Oh, sebaceous glands. The sebaceous glands are here and here and here. You're probably familiar with those now. And then of course the erector pili goosebump muscle there. So that covers the hair structures. Oh, and this is just to show you the sudoriferous sweat glands. Again, you know it's a sudoriferous sweat gland because in green here, because it has this long duct that goes all the way to the surface, okay? Instead of, again, the sebaceous glands dumping out in the hair follicles. Let's see. Oh, we do have the Pacinian corpuscles. Again, the deep pressure, the sensory corpuscles. And here's another cross section of a sudoriferous gland going all the way to the surface. Here's another one of a sudoriferous gland going all the way to the surface. You've got those, and I think we have covered it all. So I'm going to go ahead and stop and end this video. Please let me know if you have any questions about these models or if I left anything out. I would be happy to help you out.